Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hyperspace on Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven. I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening, and a special thank you to webmaster and producer Keith Rowland. And my special guest this evening is James Bartley. And James Bartley has investigated alien abductions, and particularly reptilian abductions and military abductions, mylabs, for over 20 years. James is a protege of legendary alien abduction researcher Barbara Bartholic. James is an independent historian with an emphasis on intelligence, counterintelligence, and special operations. He is a student of military history from antiquity to modern times and has made an in-depth study of the military-industrial financial security complex, which developed after World War II. James personally investigated numerous reptilian abduction cases and military abduction cases in the high desert of Southern California. The high desert of Southern California is where the deep black aerospace industry is located, as well as military installations which figure prominently in UFO and MyLab research, such as Edwards Air Force Base and Naval Weapons Center, China Lake. He is familiar with much of the UFO military underground and undersea base activity in Southern California, Northern California, Arizona, and Nevada. And his website is the universalseduction.com/Bartley. And please welcome James to the show this evening. Hi, James.
Hi, Solaris. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thanks for joining us this evening. It's a pleasure to have you on. And how have you been?
I've been pretty good. I've been looking forward to the show and looking forward to talking with you again.
Excellent. Yeah, it's always exciting to have you on, and there's so much information we can share together in so many different directions. So where do you want to start?
Well, I wanted to talk about what I call the fork in the road. Way back in the day, when we first became aware of MyLab abductions, we had kind of a unified front. We would hear about somebody having a MyLab experience, whether it was in our own state of California or if it was in another state. We would all rally around and we'd send out feelers to that other person. Let that person know that we're in contact with people that are having MyLab experiences, males and females, and this is what they've reported. This is the particular branch of the military that was doing this to them. This is the likely surface level base they were taken to, whether it's above ground or below the surface when they were taken to have these things done to them. And these are the things that's been done to these people. And just let this other person know. And, we networked through the San Diego UFO Society with like-minded researchers all over the continental U.S. And our reach extended to the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, Latin America, so on and so forth. We were very good at networking. So we would find out through the grapevine about others having these experiences, these military abduction experiences. And, we would reach out to them. And, this is before the days of the internet, before it really kicked off, long before social media. Back then, we just ran up big phone bills and wrote snail mail to each other. And but what happened was a fork in the road happened. I think back to the kind of pioneering research that my friend Dr. Karla Turner did with MyLabs. You think about the book Taken, which is a story about 8 different female MyLabs and all the different experiences they've had. And again, we had a unified front. It was very much an us against them mentality, right? Them being the military controllers, and us being the people that were going through the MyLab experiences, and our friends going through the MyLab experiences. And it very much was a common front. Now what's happened is this fork in the road occurred where we see the so-called MyLab community today, and it's just a welter, a miasma of acrimony, of infighting, of disharmony, of mudslinging back and forth. And I just wonder, just like, what happened? And I think a big part of the problem was the emphasis shifted from identifying who the perps were, what they were doing to MyLabs, the facilities above and below the surface where MyLabs are being taken, and healing modalities, ways to help these people overcome the trauma. Because as many of them related back in the day, it was bad enough I was having alien abduction encounters, but what's really traumatizing, what's really upsetting, is when elements of my own government, my own military, are coming and doing these things to me, injecting me, subjecting me to mind control, so on and so forth. And, our hearts cried out for these people, right? Now we look at it and it's just turned into a big mess. And a big part of it, I believe, is when they started calling themselves super soldiers. And I've always detested that term. There's nothing super about a female mylab being gang raped by soldiers. There's nothing super about someone being subjected to trauma-based mind control, to being subjected to electroshock, to being remotely electromagnetically beamed, to being astrally abducted, so on and so forth. Because super implies stupendous, superb, gee whiz, right? And
right.
soldier implies minion, underling, grunt, foot soldier, advancing the agenda of what is essentially the draconian empire, as far as I'm concerned, not just the New World Order. So we've taken this fork in the road, and now we see it for what it is, just like a welter of acrimony and recrimination, and it's hardly conducive to healing, to reintegration, to identifying the perps. And I would be very interested, because you're a part of this community and you've played such a critical role in getting the truth out about remote accessing, neural interface, and the AI element, so on and so forth. What are your thoughts about all that I've just mentioned? Being that you've been a part of this, you've gone to these super soldier summits and so on and so forth.
Right. Well, I agree with you 100%. I think there is a lot of triggering going on. It seems to me like the conflict stems from programming, and that there's a lot of what I call just scattered energy, almost like a psychic regurgitation. But what I do know from my own experience, even when I was an expert presenter at the Mind Control Summit, now this has been like the third year I did that, and literally there was always triggering effects. I mean, people get triggered if they're programmed, and you know this. Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. And then I question how many are actually legitimate cases. And of course, you have to look at everything with a fine-tooth comb. But I agree with you. I don't think there's a cohesiveness that needs to be there. And I really think that people need to assess the technology, go in and get themselves, kind of just reroute their energy fields to align with higher dimensional, what I call grid works, opposed to the programming that's very destructive. But I agree with you. They glamorize it completely. They want to glorify it. They want to glamorize it. And I can admit, the artificial intelligence, it's a cool thing when you first get interfaced with it. I mean, there's a lot you can do with it. There's no doubt. You and I both know. There's so many cool things you can do with the technology. However, it's weaponized. It's not being used that way. And the reason that we come out is because we want to expose it for being the misuse of what they're doing. I mean, they can't go on like this anymore.
Indeed, and they're using this capability. They're using MyLabs and assorted project people as operational assets to advance their agenda, which is essentially a depopulation agenda, among many other things. And they're doing it at the expense of not only the people having the experiences, but the population at large, indeed all life forms, and this very planet itself. It's not a good agenda. And so I see something along the lines of a Stockholm syndrome issue taking place, where a lot of these people, at some level, they identify with their perps. They identify with their controllers, because they want to be rock stars. They want to be kind of like glam divas, so to speak, both males and females. I don't know if they feel that it adds meaning to their life, if they feel that it's something they can hang on to create an identity, right?
And I think a lot of that has to do with the programming, because I think a lot of the programming makes them want to feel special. That's part of the handler, too, in my opinion.
That is, and I'm glad you brought up the aspect of triggering, because, as you know, especially when they know there's going to be a meeting of a bunch of different MyLabs and project people in general, they will program the people, sometimes even the night before these meetings, and then when they meet each other, they just trigger the hell out of each other, and that's where a lot of the acrimony and the mistrust and the suspicion really kicks in. And we have to recognize what these triggers are, and we have to be able to tune in, acknowledge, respect the trauma, identify its source, work with it, move it safely through our bodies, and be able to get the energetic circulation going again, if you will, in such a way that it neither causes harm to the person who's doing the internal work or the people around them, because we're just surrounded by subliminals. In a lot of these sci-fi shows that have a blatantly MyLab project person theme, they can be very triggering.
Right.
And so we have to recognize what the triggers are. And the problem is, as you noted, some of these people that are causing a lot of this acrimony and mistrust, they themselves are programmed. And we also see this play out in domestic relationship issues where a hive consciousness programmed male, let's say like a reptilian hybrid who's thoroughly plugged into the hive consciousness, they have a way of triggering the women, in our example, that they're supposed to control. They serve as an anchor in that woman's life. They know the body language, they know the phrases, they know the words, the demeanor that will trigger a negative response within the person to always keep them on their back foot, to always keep them rock back on their heels. And the person who's doing this, the de facto controller, they may not even be consciously aware of what they're doing. They just fit into a certain psychological, neurological profile where they're just being their normal, abusive, boorish selves, but it's just triggering the hell out of this woman in our example and keeping her locked into a state of victimization. And that's just one of a variety of different examples.
Right, and I like the way you point that out because that's so very true. You know, that saying, know thyself, I think is huge because you have to know yourself in order to understand what's programming you or what's putting an influence on you, whether it's technological or whether it's just basic mind control or even conditioning and programming from childhood or religions. I mean, literally, people need to know who they are, and that, of course, connects to the higher self, oversoul, superconscious. But yeah, that's a really big thing, but I think people are, whatever's happening, it seems to me like there's a hidden language of programming that's going on where there's an exchange like you were talking about, where they're all interconnecting and there's a separate dialogue happening around these people who are programmed, and then something else is manifesting through a hive collective. Now that's my take. There is definitely some kind of subliminal.
I agree.
I want to say machines talking to each other because that's what it reminds me of. AI machines talking to each other.
There's definitely that element too, because these people, to some degree or another, some worse than others, are being remotely accessed and remotely influenced. And because we all, to some degree or another, come from a shame-based, wounded inner child background, and we're taught by this indoctrination system, and we're taught by our elders to not trust our feelings, that emotions are bad, so on and so forth, we are reluctant to go within because we run smack dab into our inner shadow, and B, our wounded, traumatized inner child. And therein lies a lot of the problems because it is through going within, as you just pointed out. The super soldiers have been, well, some of them anyway, have been conditioned to look outside of themselves, sometimes to the furthest reaches of the cosmos for their answers. Okay, yes, somebody has been taken to Mars for an example during sometime in their past, perhaps even ongoing, but their answers are not going to be on a surface or a subsurface Mars base. Their answers will lie within. That's where the real scary work takes place. And a lot of people won't do the inner work, and mostly males I see have this problem. I hate to say it. Women have an advantage. I was just talking about this with a lady, my lab friend, last night, because we were talking about why is it that, okay, all things being equal / unequal, you take two MyLabs or project people who have been subjected from childhood and oftentimes in past lives too, to a tremendous amount of horrific abuse at all levels, family abuse, indoctrination, so on and so forth, controlling abusive partners on into their current life. Why is it that some have managed to overcome that and still when they're within their own sphere of influence, within their own lives, within their own bubble, if you will, they've made a success out of their lives? Why are they more well integrated and more healed than others? Why have so many fallen by the wayside, either through being stuck in these controlling relationships, substance abuse, and self-destructive behavior, so on and so forth? And what my lady friend pointed out is the reason a woman will have more of a likelihood, certainly by no means all women, but at least some, will have a better likelihood of reintegration, is because being women, they are manifestations of the divine feminine. They are manifestations of divine creation. We always talk about Sophia bursting forth from the black void, itself an act of creation. These women, because they come from divine source, and then of course the indoctrination, from the Anunnaki and through the Catholic Church and whatnot, about women being descended from Adam's rib, so on and so forth. It's a patriarchal, archontic world where the divine feminine has been marginalized and in many places completely eradicated. So you have women that have the means to tap in and plug into their true divine source self. And because they're women, typically they have the innate ability to talk through their problems, to emote, to have feelings, and to own up to those feelings. However shame-based or trauma-based those emotions are, some learn coping mechanisms where they can process these emotions and these feelings in a safe manner. Because they're plugged into divine source, then divine guidance kicks in and guides them through this process. Whereas a lot of males, because they've been subjected to all the indoctrination, and because of the trauma and abuse they've suffered, their default setting is what's been described as the tyranny of the left brain, i.e. the egoic, logical side of their brain, vice the right brain, intuitive, psychic, metaphysically oriented side, which plugs directly into the heart center. And of course, this also takes into account an uncluttered solar plexus, will, volition, spiritual intelligence center. The male default setting is to try to, if you will, logic their way through this. Their default setting is to think this way, their way through this, which mires them, embeds them further into this simulation matrix, right?
Right.
And therein lies the trap, because they're unwilling to process these emotions, because they're emotionally shut down, emotionally unavailable even to themselves, let alone a partner, let alone other people. It becomes like this vicious spin cycle within them, and then they fall under the sway of these obsessive compulsive disorder thought loops. And the way the archontic control system works, they want us to have negative OCD thought loops, because the negative thought loops are always laden with negative emotions and hence a negative vibe, which tends to pull us further into lower density.
Right.
What did you think about that?
No, I think you're phenomenal. That's why I'm letting you roll with the information, because it's spot on. And also, when you're talking about emotions being shut off with a lot of males and some females, but literally, I think they do that after they get so traumatized through the programming that they switch off, that they just don't want to feel anymore because it's too painful. And I do sense that if they do start to feel, that will shift their vibration and frequency, and they may not like what happens afterwards, but it will be a healing effect without a doubt. So I do believe that yes, spiritual work is critical insofar as doing the spiritual work. Even with my own circumstance, I had done the spiritual work ahead of time before I was inducted, which made the transition coming back a lot easier. There was already a bridge, so to speak. But a lot of people don't have that option, and I agree with you. I think that there's something going on there, and there seems to be a war on women, which I've noticed severely once again, and that's really unfortunate, because, as I've said before, souls are androgynous. If you get to the complexity of multiversal consciousness and energy and motion, people realize that these are suits that we occupy.
Yes.
I wish they would see beyond the matrix of what they're looking at from day to day and understand that, right?
Absolutely. And so what happens is, because there are, males in particular, are emotionally shut down and even emotionally unavailable to themselves, what's left on the platter, emotions and feelings wise, are negative emotions like rage, resentment, confusion, anger, so on and so forth. And because especially males in these MyLab and project people programs, they particularly undermine their impulse control center through electromagnetic beaming, directly beaming the frontal lobe, which is the impulse control center, and then simultaneously, when they're asleep, beaming another part of their mind, and creating this virtual reality of them always fighting and battling people and running from hordes of people that are attacking them. What they want to do is create a very impulsive person who just lashes out, who just reacts before thinking. And that goes back to the whole triggering thing, where we have to get to the point where we know what the triggers are, and we can safely process buried trauma and work through emotions in a safe way, not in a way where we're acting out impulsively, whether it's in a violent kind of physical confrontation or flaming one another on the internet, so on and so forth. So and because so many of these male MyLabs, they fall into a psychological, neurological, indeed genetic profile where they want them impulsive. I mean, we always hear stories of these project people who have domestic abuse issues, who have poor self-control, as far as women are concerned, right? Where they can, astrally rape women, or they say or do inappropriate things to them. On the one hand, on the other, they blow smoke about being a super soldier and being a freedom fighter. So there's this incongruence that's going on where their actions and behaviors belie their what they're saying about themselves, that they're a beacon of hope and light, and they're a freedom fighter. Judge them by their fruits, the fruits on their tree. And people have to remember that thinking is too slow. Too many people out there make a judgment on somebody because they look good, they smell good, they say all the right things, they convey words and thought forms in a pleasant, easygoing manner, but they're tuning out the vibe that the person is resonating. And a lot of people fall into this trap where, because of their own unresolved issues and programming that they've been subjected to in one way, shape, or form, in some way, shape, or form, they buy into what's being spoken, vice listening to their own body. Again, it goes back to working with, acknowledging, respecting the shame-based wounded inner child, and then learning how to process vibrations and feelings accordingly. When we look in the animal world, they always tune into the vibe around them, especially the animals that are preyed upon, going all the way down to the insect world, right? When they sense danger, they don't stop and think about it. They get while the getting's good. They don't kind of reason things through. Well, this person is saying things that I resonate with, and they make sense, and they're a very pleasant person. I like their body language, but they're picking up on all the wrong vibes because they're not tuning in. They're not going within.
I so agree with you. Yeah, they vacillate because it's indecision. And a lot of that, you're right, it's psychic radar. It's being fine-tuned to energy, not to a point where you take on more than you have to from other people or the environment, but literally situation awareness. Yeah, I totally agree. But, all these MyLabs and all these things that have happened to so many people, and it's really about defective programming. They're deploying defective programming onto the host or the target, and that's what's happening. I mean, so a lot of the residual effects in the feed and the behavior, unfortunately, is coming out in reflection of the programmers and obviously the handlers. But I do say to you, obviously, yeah, they have to do the spiritual work, and they have to learn how to write out that program and rewrite it and remove this stuff. They can't be victimized by it. But I think I don't want to say a lot of males, but I do think a lot of the male military types, super soldier types, tend to like that sort of thing and get involved in it, thinking it's a cool deal. But really, it's a downward spiral to nowhere. And when it's being misused and abused, it's not good for you. It's not good for anyone, the soul, the spirit. It's not good for any person they have a contact with. And it's not even good for their own futures. And I really want to point that out, because I see technology as always being a benefit or a curse to mankind, depending on how evolved mankind is to use the technology. And obviously, mankind is not evolved to the level he should be to deploying half the stuff he's doing right now.
Indeed, there must be a parallel spiritual as well as technological evolution. Otherwise, you have what we have today, where you have all these left-brained, egoic, non-empathic people twiddling the knobs, doing all this experimentation, which is harming other life forms and the planet itself. Their attitude seems to be, we're getting the funding. If it feels good, do it, right? And this mindset has trickled down to these so-called super soldiers, where they refuse to do the inner work. And so what happens is all their unresolved issues, they project out. And this manifests in posturing, overcompensating behaviors, mistrust, this notion that they somehow believe themselves to be at the epicenter of events, where they're no longer recognizing their true status vis-a-vis the controllers, i.e. that of essentially a mind-controlled slave, right? Mm-hmm. So because males typically don't like to lose control or feel like they're losing control, what some of these guys do is they confabulate and they switch things around in their memories and their minds to put themselves in a position where they tell themselves that they're in more control than they really are, that they're at the epicenter of events, that they're part of the decision-making process, you see, mm-hmm. instead of their true status, which is that of a mind-controlled slave, advancing an agenda that is inimical to the survival of not only all life forms on this planet, but the very planet itself, right? And so, again, it always goes back to going within, safely processing all that buried, hidden trauma and the emotions and the feelings and the body memories that go with it in a safe way, where over time they begin to regain their inner equilibrium and they begin to plug in firmly to their heart center and thereby to divine source, mm-hmm. where their real power is.
I so agree.
Yeah, because what's going on now also is, we talked about males here. I don't want to only pick on males, but there is an element within the female mylab and project people community where, to cite but one example, is they outwardly profess to a sort of victimization, where they claim on their Facebook status updates and they claim in their mass email postings that they're being victimized by this, that, or the other person. And sometimes they'll name these people and sometimes they won't. But in reality, some of these people that are claiming this victim status themselves are perps. They themselves are using what psychic abilities they have to mess with others in this really catty, really kind of juvenile fashion. It's like, the first day in school for the new girl, and she happens to be a pretty new girl, and all the other girls that are already in the class just instantly cop an attitude against her in a hive consciousness fashion, simply because she's new and she's kind of pretty. There's no logic behind it. There's no reason. There's no empathy, certainly, right? And so what we have is just like this Jersey-licious Jersey Shore kind of reality show, boorishness and acrimony playing out, but playing out in a psychic lower astral dimensional plane, mm-hmm. where they start like using what psychic abilities they have to do harm to someone because they're resentful, because they're jealous, because they're in some cases fully hosted by non-human entities, one or more non-human entities, and those people basically they're going to reveal themselves. Again, by their fruits ye shall know them, right? Check the fruit on the tree. Is it good fruit or is it bitter fruit, to use kind of a biblical kind of notion? And and again, these people they carry these issues with them lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, because they simply won't work through their unresolved issues, and also because some of them literally are these operational assets. They've literally been inserted into the mix to create this welter of confusion and acrimony and backbiting. And you are right. There are some people, I'm highly dubious of their credentials, if you will, as far as them being a legitimate mylab or a legitimate project person, because I go by my intuitive sense, and when I instantly make a decision about somebody where I'm not even going to waste time on this person, that tells me that there's nothing in it for me. And I'm all about healing, reintegration, kicking this archontic matrix system to the curb, and raising the frequency of this entire plane, because it was never meant to be a plane of dualities like the New Age la-di-das say. I mean, what kind of a school is it if we keep coming back with our memory swipe and we keep coming back into more and more of a patriarchal control system, right? There's nothing to be learned from that.
Absolutely.
So the original non-distorted, uncorrupted source code, to use a computer term, of this entire plane was never meant to be a plane of dualities. And because the frequencies are increasing, the energy is increasing, these polarities, these dualities are becoming more extreme, and it's manifesting in the aberrant behavior of even previously grounded and somewhat rational people. Now they're going crazy. And those people that were unbalanced have been overcome by their own inner shadow, maybe were hosts for one or more entities. They're going nuts, and they're going into attack mode. And this is reflected also in the MyLab community in spades.
Right, you've hit it spot on. Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I've watched it go into motion without a doubt. And a lot of that is, well, I call them sociopaths to some degree, because a lot of them are like that, and not just the MyLab community, but the other communities as well. And when we talk about this, it makes me wonder about the UFO community, because I'm a firm believer that a lot of the people in that community are programmed and actually completely saturated in all sorts of altars and everything else.
Absolutely, because as far as the UFO community is concerned, there are so many levels of gatekeeping. There's the ones who want to keep it at the lights in the sky. There's the ones that want to, focus obsessively on crop circles or something, or focus obsessively on just craft sightings. And they refuse to look into abductions. They refuse to look into the encounter element of it. And a lot of that has to do with the controllers know that the people that a lot of the people that have an interest in the subject, they still haven't thrown off the yoke of this cosmic vassalage, this indoctrination whereby they must always acquiesce and obey and submit to perceived master authority figures, i.e., in this case, UFO researchers who constantly invoke the bogus lamestream science, right? Because those types of people who submit to that, they haven't worked through the dogmas. They haven't worked through the programming, and the religious programming and the scientific programming. They're two sides of the same coin, because basically it's bogus lamestream science anyway. And science, as we understand it on the surface, has become just another religion with its own priesthoods, with its own dogmas, and anything that tends to undermine these existing bogus scientific models is considered a heresy, right? In the old days, they would circle the wagons with their peer-reviewed papers, and they would lambast people and marginalize them and kick them to the curb. They can't do that anymore. because of the internet. So this is why you have NASA and you have these scientists always popping up with these neato, gee whiz, woo woo discoveries. Oh, we found another planet like Earth. Yeah, you know what? There's probably countless other planets like Earth out there. So what's your point? You know what I mean? And so they're desperately trying to stay relevant. And also the New Age dogma, which is cut from the same cloth as the religious dogma and the scientific dogma, is just another kind of paradigm, controlling paradigm, which has been created to lock in people of a certain mindset who have undergone a certain type of programming. Because a lot of the New Age la-di-das, a lot of the dogmas they adhere to, a lot of the precepts they adhere to, really, it's just the terminology is a little different, but really it's just another religious dogma. It's just another form of control. So they've really cast a wide net to keep people hemmed in. Those who want to maintain a facade of scientific credibility. Oh, well, I won't look into this because it's not, it's scientifically non-credible. I'll just stick to this. And
that's what they do.
And that's what they do. And it ties in also, let me take a sip of water here.
Okay.
It ties into this shame-based programming we talked about earlier, because there are people out there I call closet case abductees. These are typically guys, again, who I know, just the vibe, the look in their eyes, they've, their body language when certain abduction-related subject matter is brought up. I can tell that they've had abductions. I can tell they're alien abductions. I can tell they've been traumatized. But because of their unresolved issues, their unwillingness to work through, to acknowledge, respect, and recognize their inner shadow, to work through their own fears, they busy themselves on essentially irrelevant and trivial aspects of the UFO phenomena, sightings. They go around collecting endless videos of UFO sightings. And some of these people, the ETs of various stripes, they hang around them a lot and will do the dog and pony act of, okay, you can, we'll allow you to summon us and we'll show up in the skies above you day or night, and then you can get some more footage, right? And so what happens is they put out that thought, oh, please show up. I need some more video today. And then the ETs show up. They do the dog and pony act in the sky, and then the guy gets the video, and then he puts together like a 2 or 3 hour video of all of his sightings. So essentially, he's spinning his wheels. Okay, when one looks at the International Space Station footage that slipped through the cracks, the Soho Sun Observatory footage that slipped through the cracks, okay, those sightings of stupendous planet-sized craft, now that's interesting. Just another craft in the atmosphere, not so interesting. But by that guy going out, spinning his wheels on essentially a non-confronting, non-threatening to the system subject, i.e. just more UFO footage, right? It's non-threatening to the system, and it neutralizes that particular person who's unwilling to look within, deal with his own fears, and find out about his own experiences. I've sat through, right? I'm ashamed to say, I've sat through like whole presentations where I'm in an audience and then someone is playing a videotape or a DVD, and it's like one UFO sighting in the atmosphere after another. Sometimes these are multiple craft, but after a while, it's like I start fading. It's like someone crank up the air conditioning. I'm falling asleep here. You know what I mean?
We're off-worlders to begin with, and I want to make that clear that we are star people. So to me, it's not a big thrill insofar as, seeing a UFO. I mean, I just don't get it myself personally. Yes, with the way we have multiple dimensions here, multiversal energies, and we have many dimensions. And yeah, you can probably pick up on a lot of different things, whether it's a UFO, an orb, whatever. But I will say one thing, this is one of my pet peeves, and I've mentioned it before on my show, but whenever there's this push for the UFO disclosure, which is fine to some degree, I always ask, where is the push for the psychotronic mind control disclosure? Because that is why people are drawn to the UFOs to begin with. I have news for them. And if they don't start putting the pieces together and I think they're scared to, because they don't want to approach the
Yes.
government. They want to blame it on ET. Well, I have news for you. They better start looking in the underground and the black technology where I come from,
Yes.
because that's the
Yes.
key to the whole darn situation.
It is. And what's going on now with all the artificial cloud formations, all the images and the faces and the ETs and the dragons and so on and so forth, they're showing up within the artificial cloud formations. This is all being subliminally downloaded to the people, whether they are aware of the nature of the artificial cloud formations or not. It's still being embedded, and there are people out there that have done tremendous work with highlighting, contrasting, editing, photos of these cloud formations. There's all kinds of stuff hiding in the clouds. There's poorly cloaked craft. There's all kinds of pictograms and like symbols, even just in a patch of blue sky, however rare that is today. There are things where when one cleverly uses the editing techniques in Photoshop and such, they can pull out all kinds of stuff that's there. And so they're not even aware of the mass nature of the mind control in the skies above us, as well as the entertainment the entertainment industry and the media. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I can talk for days about what I consider to be the bogus nature of the disclosure movement, because they don't address the core issues, right?
I agree.
Because the powers that be, most of these corporations, because of the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and the like, have provided the seed money to the handful of aircraft companies at the beginning, which later morphed and merged into these gigantic aerospace corporations, which are plugged into the deep black military, and eventually all these recovered alien craft wind up in private hands. The military does the initial analysis, and then they pass it on to the aerospace corporations, and then then we have the so-called breakaway civilization, and so on and so forth. And so they don't want to address the issue of the recovered technology and how it could be used to benefit all life on this planet. They don't want to address the issue of all the people who have been murdered over the years. I'm just talking flat out murder. There was a time when people would get bumped off just for having a blurry UFO photograph back in the 50s, 60s, even into the 70s, right? People today just don't understand that. They don't talk about all the people that have been harassed and ridiculed and had their lives turned upside down through black ops skullduggery. It's not only that the technology has been funneled into these deep black special access programs, which the late Ben Rich himself said would take an act of God to get it out of these special access programs. But there is also an issue of compensation for the families of those people who've been murdered, for the people who've been harassed and ridiculed and subjected to mind control, getting back to the whole MyLab thing, and also
lab rats.
the lab rats, the greater mind control, people who have never had alien abduction experiences but are still being subjected to mind control. And so the so-called disclosure types, they skirt all around that. I remember.
I know, and it makes me very angry, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah. That's why I've never taken them seriously. I've seen them as controlled opposition. I remember when that guy who's recently retired and was blowing smoke about how he regretted not revealing more about UFOs in his time in political office, John DePodesta or something like that. John Podesta, DePodesta, whatever his name is. He's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission, if memory serves. And they're having, when he first came out and talked about UFO disclosure, I remember all these gullible fools, these dangerously naive people in the disclosure / exopolitics movement. They had a hallelujah breakdown about this John Podesta guy. And I said, CFR, trilateralists, this is going to go nowhere. They're just spinning their wheels again. And that's exactly what happens. He finishes his time in office. He's probably going to wind up in the think tank or, wind up in the board of a corporation somewhere. And he was just throwing the people a bone about disclosure.
Correct. Right? And also the UFOs right now are a mass appeal. It's a real hot topic right now, which is another reason they're kind of looking at it twice.
Yes, because again, it's an effort by the powers that be to maintain control of a situation that's rapidly spiraling out of control.
Correct.
Once again, thanks to the internet, this mass consciousness expansion, and the fact that there's more and more people that have had their own experiences and sightings and whatnot, they're putting out their own information through their own YouTube channels. It's clear to me, and I've talked about this before, that they're creating yet another priesthood, this time of a lot of ex-military people who are still on a leash, right? Mm-hmm. You have these gatekeepers like Nick Pope. That guy is so transparent. He comes on, I think it was the History Channel during a UFO documentary, and he talks about how only military people are credible, valid sources of UFO
not true.
Information.
Actually, they can be compromised too easily. You know that. They have screen memories and everything else. They're so programmable. That's right. Yeah,
they're so programmable. And he dismissed civilians, non-military people who have had UFO sightings and UFO experiences as a Joe six-pack. That's what he called them, Joe six-pack.
Insulting, yeah.
It's insulting, and why people have not ostracized him, why they still are buddy-buddy to him in the UFO conferences, all this glad handing and back, slapping, and we're all in this together, pal, when the guy is the veritable embodiment of everything that's wrong with this planet. Right. And I knew when he popped up that he was just like a bogus gatekeeper, because he latched on to the Rendlesham Forest Bentwaters Woodbridge events that happened in December 1980, simply because he was in a non-entity of a Ministry of Defense department called the Flying Complaints desk, where people basically would call in, complain about like low-flying planes making noise and stuff, and every once in a while like a UFO report would cross his desk, and then so they parade this guy around as like a Ministry of Defense, an ex-MOD expert on UFOs, poster boy, just a limited hangout, GTFO. It's like the guy is a nobody, and but still, he gains currency because they keep putting him on TV and so on and so forth. So that's mainstream, right. And so there's definitely an effort on the part of the system of creating these new priesthoods, creating these faux whistleblowers, right? Mm-hmm. And when they invoke the lamestream science, and when they parade these scientific credentials, my eyes glaze over, and I just have to work really hard to stay conscious, basically, because it means nothing to me. You and I know we're galactic humans.
I'm a mystical scientist, man, and I know more than they'll ever know. I mean, and I don't say this with arrogance, James. I have access to things. I know. I make these guys look. They turn red by the information I know. They say, "Where's your clearance? Where's your clearance?"
Yeah, that's
Universal
right. That's
clearance,
right,
buddy.
That's right. That's right. We used to be, and we're heading back towards being our normal multidimensional quantum selves, right? And you look at all these left-brained, ego-driven faux scientists, right? Where did you get your degree at? That's a default setting, but
you mean a mainstream
off.
Earth linear program degree that teaches absolutely
nothing? Right. That's right.
I'm trained
Rothschild. That's right. A Rothschild Rockefeller, institution where they've been dumbed down. They want fries with that, exactly. And so you know what? They're losing a grip because of the footage and the ISS, the Soho Observatory, so on and so forth. So they're desperately trying to maintain credibility. Now, before the break, was there anything else you wanted to bring up? We've been kind of all over the map again.
I think we're great. We've got about 10 minutes plus or minus before the break. But, I agree with you. There are no secrets in the universe, as I've said before. So this whole obfuscation, the smoke screens, the only reason that the information and this black technology is not revealed is because it's used for mass control. That's the bottom line. It's used for oppression. They're not using it for the highest good. If they were, it'd be out. You'd see it. We'd have free energy. We'd have everything that we're doing on this linear world would be shifted automatically. So obviously, and coming from my expertise in the world of synthetic telepathy and artificial intelligence, I can tell you point blank, they're using it as a weapon of control. So, I mean, this what you just touched on is very critical, because sometimes people need to hear this. And not that I don't care about the UFO disclosure to some degree, but they have to have the whole area. They can't just encompass one little, what you call cherry picking, which is what they do.
Yes. And if they
take
have
somebody like me out there to talk about the covert technology, right?
That's right. because there's a lot of people that are suffering on a daily basis. Some of my closest MyLab friends, I have confided to me they think they may be dying because of their life force just being sapped out of them, and yes, and the kind of crap they have to endure, like their blood panels, their blood work results are always disappearing, and always having to give more blood, and always have to go in for tests, which always come up negative, which doesn't show or come up with any diagnosis about why they're so ill, because there's a human tragedy involved.
Absolutely.
This is another thing that irks me about these super soldier types. There are people out there that they're not just living day to day, and they're all, in many cases, they're already basically impoverished, living a life of economic bondage, right? Where they're suffering from want and lack of abundance because of this monetized debt system that's been created, but also their health has gone down the tubes. They have all these mysterious illnesses, autoimmune disorders, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome. They have aches and pains in their lower back and their hips and this, that, and the other, and they're either routinely misdiagnosed, or often as not, they're never given a proper diagnosis. The results always come up like negative, and part of the problem is not only are the Rockefeller trained medical types ill-equipped to deal with such things or such maladies, right? Because it's not part of their worldview, but also that's if the MyLab or project person even ventured forth what they think the problem is. But because there's such a black ops element within the medical community, in any major hospital, there's always going to be intelligence assets in the hospital administration that will side route these results that indicate that somebody is of a certain bloodline, a certain genetic type, right? And especially if a person is an ongoing project, their medical records, their blood work, et cetera, often turns up lost or is unavailable, or they need more blood even. And, we know that things like cloning and whatnot are going on. So what these super soldiers better understand is they're disposable assets. They can clone any one of them out. They've probably done it already. And if they just decide to pull the plug and end their particular lives, they can do that quite simply. And there's a number of different ways they can do that too.
Right. And also there's the EEG cloning. Let us not forget that,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
which creates the brain template, of course. And you're talking to somebody who has technology built into their system, into their neural circuitry. I've had this for 11 years now. And this is why beings like us who wander this world and are literally at the mercy of a remote access, it's not cool. And this is why we need to expose it. And this is why we need to say, hey, your body is your sacred temple. It cannot be violated this way. I consider this to be a war crime to the highest, to the worst level.
Yes, it is. It is. First of all, we keep getting hatched into this archontic patriarchal world with for the most part, our past life memories swiped. Even those of us who kind of got in through a back door, right? We accepted this assignment with the understanding that we're going to be, at least initially, severely limited in our when it comes to our total celestial power, our multidimensional quantum selves. For a large part of our lives, will be muted and will be marginalized and diminished. And we come into this knowing that there's all these limitations and inhibitions we have to accept in order to do our work, right? And we come anyway, and there's been many like us. But because of this attrition rate that's been going on, because of all the abuse that people have suffered from day one, these people in these projects, these people who came here with the intention of being a paradigm buster, a frequency buster, they get stuck in controlling, manipulative relationships. They're often is not born into a patriarchal, archontic controlled family of total toxicity, of total dysfunction, of total manipulation, of incest, of pedophilia, of abuse, so on and so forth. And because they have all this trauma and wounded, shame-based inner child self, they go through life making poor decisions. They go through life making bad associations with bad people, and a lot of them like succumb to substance abuse, so on and so forth. And many just outright die or are killed, and many are just thoroughly neutralized from economic bondage for one reason or another. Many of them just haven't been able to keep up, and my heart goes out to them, those that are still alive, and those that have lasted this long, that are pretty much still well integrated and have done a lot of their inner healing and a lot of their inner work. They know that the curtain's about to rise. They know that their work is just getting started, right? And so those people who feel called to do special work here, meaningful work to fulfill your destiny, just avoid this whole welter of acrimony in the so-called super soldier community. You're spinning your wheels with exopolitics and the disclosure movement. I locked horns one time with Stephen Bassett, one of the big shots in the exopolitics movement, and people. They're nice to him. They kiss up to him. You know why? Because they want to be. Yeah, they want to be invited to his conferences again. You know what I mean? Because that's more important than reintegration, healing this planet and ourselves, of course, and saving and protecting all the life forms in this planet. So before we go on a break, I said some things during a panel at the end of the Roswell Conference in July 2007 in Roswell, New Mexico. I poured cold water on this whole exopolitics kind of notion. And I was very much the fly in the ointment. And Stephen Bassett didn't like it. I pointed out, well, you know what? It's like, what about all this free energy which could and the means to heal people, right? And all that, and what about all the compensation for all the victims and the families of the people who've been killed?
He had a problem with that?
Oh yes, he did. He was blowing smoke. Who is this guy? He was trying to big shot me, right? I mean, he's a relative nobody himself. He just suddenly popped up on the screen.
Well,
I've been doing this.
Yeah, I know.
I've been doing this work for 25 years now.
I know you're
know what I mean?
To me, you're the top of the line. And that's why I like to have you on my show, because you're sincere and you know your stuff. Just like, we don't have big egos. You or myself. I mean, I've done the research. I've experienced in the technology. I don't sit here and fly, with this big ego. And a lot of them do. So I appreciate what you do. I mean, I appreciate you coming forward, and I appreciate you talking and actually calling people out, because I'd like to call some of these guys out and say, hey, I'm one of the, I was an expert presenter at the Super Soldier Summit talking about mind control and the synthetic telepathy. I'm a test pilot for the technology. Why aren't you guys going over to Washington? If you want to sit there and disclose something, start talking about all the people that have been murdered remotely through this technology.
That's right.
Their vitals taken out, their lives taken away. I'm sick and tired of lights in the sky myself, and I'm sorry, guys. I don't mean to get fired up here. But
I am too.
Where I've been in the torturous avenues and the technology that I know they're using and deploying that is hellaciously evil, I want that to be disclosed. That's right. What I'm looking at.
Look at that limited hangout when Hazel O'Leary, Secretary of Energy back in the Clinton days, where she probably had a moment of conscience or something, but she released all this documentation, declassified documentation about a lot of the mind control and a lot of the experimentation on people. And a number of people, I think, went to Congress and they talked about what they've been subjected to, their own victimization, and so on and so forth. That's just the tip of the iceberg. That in itself, however well-intentioned O'Leary may have been, was still a limited hangout. There's countless people like yourself who are being subjected to this and being hammered by this every single moment of every single day, right? And so, like, all this disclosure stuff, this has to be front and center. It's just to the point now where this mass mind control program has to be front and center.
I totally agree with you. 100%. We're on the same page. And with that being said, we're going to take a quick break. Everybody stay tuned. We'll be right back with James Bartley. Welcome back, everybody, to Hyperspace on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm Solaris BlueRaven, and I'm here with my special guest, James Bartley. James, you with me? He might have stepped away just a second. He'll be back in just a micro minute, I'm sure. So with that being said, let's just hang on for a second here. I'm unmuted. He's back. Okay. James, you with us?
I'm here.
All right. Thank you. Excellent. Well, I really appreciate you being on tonight, and I appreciate your sincerity. There's something about you. I just love your honesty. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And the hour we've got left, is there any things that you had in mind? It's like one of my questions for you would be like, how have you been able to really like heal and reintegrate and really take ownership? Stand in your own power, stand in your own authority. You recognize what's been done to you, because to me, you're a shining example of someone who's been subjected to a lot of horrendous crap, but you've still overcome this. You are one of the leaders, one of the pioneers in this whole field, in my view.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you saying that. Well, I'm pretty stubborn, which is why I'm still alive. But I learned how to ride the technology, James. I just rode the technology. I basically rewrote the program and learned how to reset my energy field in alignment with what I was before they inducted me in 2004. And even though I have anomaly signals and I have other things that go on, I mean, if anybody knows, if you look at my documentary, I have measurable technology embedded in me and neural circuits.
Yes.
I mean, this is real-time live technology that you cannot disable. So this stuff is for real, which is one of the reasons we address it, which is one of the reasons I'm out and talking about it. So yeah, I mean, I just learned how to rewrite the program, and I stayed strong, and I didn't get compromised. I kept my benchmark of multiversal consciousness, and I stayed connected to my higher self-universal superconscious, and I basically tried, just literally pushed out the handlers, the controllers, the programmers. But the problem I see, and the problem that I encounter with other people, randomly around the world, is that they are accessible to some degree once they get integrated into these programs. And I don't like being accessible, not on somebody's payroll. And I think that that's a really big thing, because you're talking about multidimensional design. We're talking about light body. And those of us who've done the spiritual work, well, when you're ascending to levels of consciousness and higher consciousness, you don't want people interfering with that flow of energy. And what I've noticed that this technology is able to do as an artificial intelligence design is run interference. So, but I'm working out the kinks. But still, after 11 years, I mean, that's been a long 11 years for me. So, and my life will never be the same. But I have my books and documentary, and as you say, I've been out here, and thank you for the kind words. I'm out there, doing my presentations, and I'm available, with the information. So.
Well, you're making a difference, and the whole concept of running interference is key, because, like a lot of people, as you know, they spin their wheels a lot in the astral planes, and I ask myself, why do you want to stay like in the lower astral planes? You should like aim for much higher than that. Go into the inner planes and go really tap into your multi-dimensional selves, and because the astral planes are the playground of the lower fourth dimensional entities, right?
Yep, exactly.
And by pulling us into those lower astral planes, that's what they're doing to access a lot in astral operations and whatnot, in astral remote viewing and astral ops, where they'll take the astral body of a sleeping or an awake person, and then utilize it for their own purposes, for reconnaissance or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And so we have to be able to rise above that, to ride the frequency wave.
Absolutely, and know the technology.
Know the technology,
right.
Yes.
One thing I can tell you about the technology, too, is these array systems, especially the ones they're using now with the black satellites, they can calibrate to your high frequencies now. So it's not just about low frequencies or somebody in the lower astral realm. I mean, whatever frequency you're at, if you're a Buddhist monk, I mean, if you're an ascended master consciousness, they can still piggyback off of that natural wave. And that's the technology I'm talking about, that's literally designed to do a mass induction, mass electromagnetic field induction, and, of course, control the masses psychologically, intuitively, mentally, physically, spiritually. It's a mess. The whole thing is about control. There's no doubt.
It is, and things seem to be coming to a head as well, because the powers that be seem to be pulling out all the stops. And like I always say, and people have to intuit this and then decide if what I'm saying is the truth, the powers that be seem to be working against a celestially driven timetable. It's like they know something big is coming, and it's going to engender all these earth changes and all these other things, and then they want to kind of in parallel have like a financial collapse, but on their own terms, so they have a soft landing compared to everyone else, right?
Right.
They want to be able to pull out all the stops with all this fake terror and whatnot, in order to really hammer home their control grid. They're turning loose all these mind-controlled jihadists to justify all the security and all these invasions and humanitarian interventions or whatever euphemisms they're using today. And what's alarming to me also is we're seeing them really push the vaccine agenda, right?
Yeah.
Where they're demonizing people and equating so-called anti-vaxxers with domestic extremists, terrorists, so on and so forth. And the state has already been taking people's children away because they, the parents rightly refuse to allow their children to be hammered with deadly vaccines. So we're seeing more and more of that. And what's interesting too, now that we're on the subject, is this Borg collective hive consciousness is so pervasive these days. A friend of mine, she's another MyLab abductee survivor. She was telling me about this conversation she had at work the other day where she mentioned that she was having this issue with some of her hair falling out. And her coworker, a guy, says to her, "Have you been eating organic food?" And then my friend said, "What's that got to do with anything?" And then he just went on this whole spiel about how it's bad for him, and all he was doing was bad for her, and all he was doing was repeating what the media told him. And now there's a full court press, full demonization attack on all things organic, all things natural, that to want to have a healthy lifestyle, to eat well, to exercise, is now equated with insanity, is now equated with a mental disorder. You know what I mean? See, all this time I didn't know. I've been taking like barley grass mixed with my brown rice milk, gluten-free. I've been, taking my olive leaf extract. And all that time I was sliding ever closer to the brink of madness. And the thing about it is my sidekick Harvey, an 8-foot tall invisible rabbit, had been warning me about a healthy lifestyle. Had been warning me about apple cider vinegar and barley grass mix. I should have listened to him.
That's right. And I like Harvey, by the way.
Yeah, I like Harvey too.
I like
he says hello
rabbit
to everyone out there.
Cool.
And so another aspect to this also is, okay, that's a manifestation of the mass mind control where because they've been shunted into the left brain and basically fed garbage, they just uncritically believe and acquiesce whatever their putative masters tell them to believe, right? And now what we're seeing in macrocosm, what you've endured on a personal level, but on a macrocosmic level, not as extreme as you and others have experienced, but I see the same pattern wherein because we live in what I call a fast food society, where we're conditioned to want to have instant gratification, vice, delayed gratification. And there was a Simpsons episode where Homer was looking at the instructions for a microwave dish, and it said heat on high for 20 seconds, and then Homer goes, 20 seconds, I want it now. Now, what's interesting, the point of relevance is this, that with biometrics being the way it is, a lot of these kids today who've only known a life of iPhones, of tablets, of social media, right? They're already plugged into the Borg collective. They're already plugged into the hive consciousness. And then you add on Common Core education and all that. The appeal is already there for them to latch on to embrace, rather, biometrics, because like they can't be bothered to spend 4 seconds to punch in a 4-digit PIN number. A lot of these people would rather have like a biometric thumbprint, eye scan, something to be able to access their technology, their bank account, so on and so forth.
Right.
Let me give you another example. I just found this out the other day. There's a mobile phone company called Optus, and people could look this up on Google. Type in Optus cash out, And what Optus Cash Out is, the appeal that the Optus mobile phone company spews out to their users is, okay, let's say you've forgotten your credit debit card at home, right? And you still want to be able to access money from the bank or be able to make a payment of some kind. You can still use, even if, and this is the appeal, even if your mobile phone battery is dead, you can still use your cell phone to make transactions, to make purchases, even if the battery is dead. Now, what's interesting is a lot of people think they're being clever. Oh, we're going to have like a secret discussion here. Please take the battery out of your cell phone. Now, you know what that article tells me? It don't matter. It don't matter if you take your battery out of your cell phone, because not only can you, with some companies, can you go, make transactions with it, but it'll record you anyway, right? It'll track your movements anyway, whether you take the battery out or not. So these people are thoroughly plugged in. And now in Europe and increasingly in Latin America, we're hearing stories, and I've heard, accounts of this myself, where in nightclubs and bars where people are being swiped essentially by scanners to pay for their drinks and to pay for their meals. It's being automatically deducted out of their accounts through embedded microchip implants, right? But the appeal is there because they've grown up. It's convenient. And they want to be chic and trendy. They want to be the first ones. And it's all transhumanism, as you know. And what these kids ought to do is talk to somebody like you, and you'll give them an earful about what they want
to lose their freedom.
Yeah, that's right.
The thing is, James, and you and I both know this, is that once you get plugged into this stuff, it's not just about being tracked or having convenience with accessing accounts and wherever you're going. It's more about the interface with artificial intelligence. Once they start, doing brainwave templates and interfacing your brainwave activity onto an artificial intelligence program, then you get a feedback, then you get a live handler, then you get a programmer. And if they think for 1 minute they'll have freedom of thought, dream on. I will tell you that the future is worse than 1984 if it goes in this spiral and it doesn't get stopped.
And what's interesting too, just as you have these non-empathic kids who delight in like hacking into computer systems and all that, and when they get busted, they're typically turned and made to work for their new controllers, right? And what's interesting is when some of these mylabs, who are very often very psychic and have a natural ability to remote view it, so on and so forth. Anyway, sometimes when they're caught up in that energetic field, when they're in this carrier wave frequency that's being sent to them and their surroundings by the controllers, sometimes, like you said, there's a feedback loop where they can tune in and see the source of where all this is coming from. And often as not, what they tell me is sometimes, not always, but sometimes, they see the ones figuratively and literally tweaking the knobs and working the control consoles. They're basically kids. Sometimes they're in military uniform. Sometimes they're not. But they're young people, right? Because they've grown up playing video games. They've grown up being very good at computers, and so because they've been shunted into the tyranny of the left brain. They're operating from an egoic perspective because they're lacking empathy. When they're put in these programs and they're surrounded by this big, industrial scale apparatus, and their egos are all activated, they think, golly gee whiz, this is a neat thing. And it never occurs to them the suffering and the misery that they are subjecting to the people who are the recipients of their manipulations. And so these kids are plugged right in. On the surface level world, some of them wind up being remote drone operators, and in the deep black world, they wind up being these mind controllers.
Right. Do you remember I didn't mean to interrupt you, but do you remember Ender's Game?
I saw that, yes.
Well, now, doesn't that just parallel everything? If you haven't checked it out, there's obviously the book, and then, of course, but that's what it's about. I mean, literally, this little boy, but he didn't realize it wasn't, they were kind of treating it like a game and a simulation, when in fact it was real-time war. Yeah, yes, it was. I mean, there's a good message in that.
There's a good message in that, and the relinquishing of one's identity, one's self-worth, in order to go with the flow and be a part of the herd, be a part of the collective. It's all about the collective. It's got nothing to do with the individual. It's the individual's dreams, visions of what they want to do in the future. It's all been sublimated. And the big fear, the boogeyman is, oh, these aliens are going to come around and they're going to screw us over again. So, whatever kind of pain and trauma you have to endure in this training in order to be able to function properly the way we want you to, just suck it up, because it don't matter, because you don't matter. You're plugged into the Borg collective, and more we're seeing that in the cinema, in TV and everything. Like for example, to give. See, it's a self-regulating feculent cesspool is what it is. Let me give you an example. And I like to use grassroots examples that really hammer home certain points. In this case, the mass indoctrination, the social engineering, the use of hate crime concepts to shunt freedom of speech and to shunt independent thought. The other day, there was this gal. Before she boarded a flight to South Africa, I think it was, she tweeted out stupidly and dangerously, in a dangerously naive fashion, I might add, but she tweeted out, "I'm going to Africa. I hope I don't catch AIDS. Oh, never mind. I'm white. Ha ha." Right? Something along those lines. Well, by the time she landed in Africa, because one of those people she thought were her friends on her Twitter list wasn't her friends. Wasn't a friend. The person had like a mass following, like 15,000 or so people. He turned around and retweeted it, and pretty soon it went viral around the world. And by the time she got to Africa, she was being hammered from all sides for making. And the interesting thing about it is, there is a depop agenda, a depopulation agenda, specifically targeting sub-Saharan African blacks, right? With AIDS and other similar pathogens that were like genetically engineered in a lab somewhere. So there was an element of truth, ironically, to what she said. It was just, like I read something like that, to me, it's water off a duck's back. But the programming is such.
People are
within
triggered.
all those. It triggered people. They start hammering her, racist, this, and how could you make light of such a thing? Blah blah. All these self-righteous phonies just came out of the woodwork and hammered her unmercifully. So it's an example of the Matrix, like rising up, a many-headed Hydra, multi-headed Hydra, and just biting this woman, coming from every direction because of an innocent, naive comment she made on Twitter.
Wow.
Right?
See, I don't tweet, whatever the hell they call it. But it reminds me of the modern day witch hunts. I swear, people are strange. I mean, and a lot of those people are the trolls. You don't know who they are. I mean, they get triggered so easily. My goodness. Yeah. How crazy is that?
Yeah, it is. And this, this self-righteousness, and the thing about it is people and their suffering has become an abstraction. That's part of the desensitization, if that's a word, from the mass media. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a multi-syllable word, and I'll just pass on it at the moment. And we see this through cinema, we see this through TV, and so on and so forth, where and people have heard me talking about this before, where people become abstractions. Like the example I like to use is a circle of kids standing around with their cell phones, filming another kid being bullied, and then later, uploading the results onto their YouTube channel. It's in my day. It's like if we saw some kid being bullied, we would have intervened. We would have put the bully in his or her place, and that would have been that. But nowadays, because so many of these kids they lack empathy, they're plugged into the hive consciousness transhumanist matrix. The kid who's being bullied becomes an abstraction. It's not so much that the kid's emotions don't matter or don't exist, or the fact that the kid is being beaten and humiliated. In their minds, the kid himself doesn't, or herself doesn't even exist. Yeah, the kid is there as kind of a circus sideshow vaudeville act, which they're fortunate enough at the right place, right time to take a video of. Right?
You're so right.
And and then they upload it, it's because they're so detached from their own feelings, and they're so detached from, let alone, empathizing with someone going through this. And it goes back to the what I've talked about a lot in the past, and you've probably heard about this. Everyone has heard about hypnotic regressions, where someone's taken to incident in their current life or even past life regressions. But what a lot of people don't realize is there's actually been future progression hypnotic sessions. My mentor, Barbara Bartholic, was trained by a world-class hypnotherapist, and he had this kind of interest on the side where he would future progress via hypnosis, people willing to go through the process. And time after time, in a future incarnation, what emerged was that these people lived here on Earth or maybe some other place, but they lived in dome cities because the environment was so polluted they could no longer live on the surface without being under a dome. Mm-hmm. That the people that they incarnated into will incarnate. Well, the probability exists anyway in a future incarnation. Not only themselves, but their colleagues and people around them in these future scenarios, they were little more than automatons. They were just functional enough to work the machines, work the computers, keep the system going. Mm-hmm. And the way that Barbie described it to me was that there wasn't even any laughter anymore. There wasn't any joy anymore. There wasn't any independent thought anymore. These people were just no more than drones. They were automatons, smart enough to work the machines and the computers to keep the system going. And if people think that's a far-fetched kind of outcome for this or another alternate timeline stream, they better think again, because we're already seeing manifestations of this. And this example I just cited of all the kids watching somebody being bullied, right? Exactly. Everything has become an abstraction. And what emotions that they manifest these days are basically social engineered emotions. For example, the prevalence of these unreality shows. The Kardashians and Jersey Shore and Geordie Shore and Jerseylicious, where normally repugnant attributes and behaviors like boorishness, irrationality, hysteria, so on and so forth, they're glorified as being chic and trendy. They're normalizing it. So the only so rather than the kind of emotions which the system doesn't want us to have, i.e. empathy and conscience, love and compassion, those are marginalized and made to look weak and sissified, whereas these other emotions, which are shown again and again in the mass media and entertainment world of boorishness, aggressiveness, irrationality, all that is glorified and made to look chic, trendy, sexy, right? And people are gullible. They're impressionable. They're going to buy into that because what it does is it gives them permission to give vent to their own base impulses, to give vent to their own base nature, right? Their unresolved issues, their inner shadow, which they have yet even to acknowledge, let alone start to acknowledge and work with, right? So all the only emotions that come out, the only emotions that are left on the platter, if you will, are negative ones.
Yeah,
right?
That is so true. Well, I don't like the idea of people being used as entertainment. And I think you hit it spot on when you were talking about how people are voyeurs now. I mean, they literally watch everybody and film everybody, but there's no action, there's no energy, emotion, there's no compassion or respect for your fellow man and courtesy, which goes a long way. That's one of the things we teach in martial arts. I mean, courtesy and respect. I mean, if you don't have it, you can't earn a black belt. That's the bottom line. So these are very good qualities to have. But I think that this is all boiling down to a lack of spiritual evolution and a disconnect from higher consciousness.
That's right. And what's going on also along that vein is getting back to the whole faux super soldier syndrome, right? If a lot of these people revel in the fact that they have all these followers on Facebook, and they revel in the fact that they have so many views of their YouTube videos and so many comments and so on and so forth, because in many cases they're operating from a standpoint of ego in the left brain, and it goes back to what we were saying about this lack of empathy and this disconnect and looking outwards for our gratification and for our understanding. There has to be this inner work done, because a lot of these people presume to be leaders, and I don't want to be a leader. All I do is I plant seeds and I encourage people to be leaders in their own right, to work in these little cells scattered here, there, and everywhere. It's always better to work in ones and twos and little cells scattered all over the place than to be part of an organization, right? And everyone working equally, pulling the oars in the same direction. And what some of these super soldier types don't seem to understand is they will never be a leader unless they are someone who's worthy of being followed. And that comes in all aspects of their lives, not only what they're outwardly manifesting and exhibiting, but in their own inner chamber, if you will, in their own, in the privacy of their own home, in their own internal solitude, in their own internal space. What's going on there? What's going on when no one but the controllers and goddess and divine creation can see what you're doing, right? That's the benchmark. That's the barometer. Like you and I, we hold ourselves accountable to the divine creation and to all the people who've passed on before us. We hold ourselves accountable to them. It's not we're messengers, and we've taken on these bodysuits and this soul bubble to be to try to make a difference here and plant seeds and encourage others and nurture others. It's not about being leaders. It's not about being big shots and blowing smoke about, and you listen to some of these super soldiers. It's you'll listen 15, 20 minutes, and sometimes they're so scattered that
they are scattered, and I can profile them very well. Yeah,
so scattered and so incoherent that it's off-putting even to me to watch them.
Yeah, I don't even call them super soldiers. To be honest with you, I call them programmed units. I mean, there are some that are really hardcore. But I mean, for myself, I mean, honestly, I'm a second-degree black belt. So when I was interfacing with artificial intelligence, if anybody qualifies for that sort of title in the illusion of, I probably would. But literally, I mean, a lot of these people are just on mind trips. They've been psychotronically fractured, and they're literally a mess. And of course, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's the tip of the iceberg when it comes down to it.
It is, and the thing about it is they need to look within. Look themselves in the mirror and be honest with themselves and ask themselves, are they people that are worthy of being followed? Are they people that are worthy of being entrusted with the responsibility of speaking to other people who've been subjected to these same kinds of manipulations and mind control, right? Or are they part of the problem, or are they part of the solution? And that's what it comes down to.
I agree.
And
totally.
And we're going to see, I think, as time goes on, more and more people will gravitate to their own soul tribe, if you will, that they're going to just give themselves permission. Look, as much as possible, I'm going to detach and unplug from this matrix, this simulation, and that includes all this acrimony and all this mudslinging in the super soldier so-called field, right? I'm just going to work on myself and a few other like-minded people, and together they will move mountains. They will. It always starts with the first circle, as you know, ourselves. And just as one drops a pebble into like a pond, and you see the concentric circles spread out across the water. That's how it is with us. We work on ourselves. We become, and we're always in the process of becoming a better person.
Right.
And we encourage, we nurture others. We believe in them before they believe in themselves. And then what happens is we all start vibing on the same kind of like frequency, where we're just riding this frequency wave. And when we come from a heart-centered perspective, what happens is the divine matrix, as Greg Braden calls it, it really does start responding to us. We begin to manifest things from the lag time between the thought or the question that goes out and the response from the divine matrix coming back. The lag time is shrinking.
Right.
Things are coming back to us. we're just playing around, clicking on this, clicking on that on the internet, and we're just intuitively guided to where we need to go. Things that fit into what we've been thinking about, problems that we've been, working to resolve. And that's how it works. But if we come from a place of ego, vice coming from a heart-centered place, it's the matrix will just shovel them heaps of nonsense and confusion and everything else, and just keep them spinning in their wheels.
Totally.
And I know you've seen this. I've seen this too.
I have, and once again, it's about we do manifest at will our own reality, any reality. We're working in a hologram here, and it's all about the higher self, oversoul, superconscious connection, which is very simple, but yet for a lot of people, if they haven't done the spiritual work, there's no access. But yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I totally resonate with it, without a doubt.
Yeah, and people better get on board with that, because this illusionary time frequency, as you call it, is starting to speed up. And as such, as a result, because these frequencies are increasing, because the energies streaming in from the galactic core are increasing, people are being activated. And either they'll go, like, again, the polarities are becoming more extreme. Either they'll go one way or they'll go another, right? And a lot of that has to do with their own mental hygiene. So many people are afflicted with what I call stinking thinking.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
It should be a book.
These negative OCD thought loops,
Right.
And also coming from a place of ego, which is embedding them even further into this matrix. They better shape up or shape out, because nature, despite the horrific abuse that she has endured, she will sort out the weak. Just as, like, the weakest member of a herd will be culled by predators, the same thing in this world. It's people better start getting their vertical upright alignment, like with whatever higher power, whatever they choose to call it, divine source. They better get their alignment right, because as time goes on, things are going to be getting crazier. We're going to be hammered by more carrier wave frequencies. The GMO is everywhere now. So even when we consciously strive to detach and unplug from this matrix, we're still confronted with it all the time. And it's a frequency war, right?
Totally.
And so that's why we're seeing, like, madness just manifesting in all its forms all over the place.
Yeah, it's a weaponized world, and I do believe
it's
that
a weaponized world.
Yeah, whatever you want to call the law of grace, the divine presence, divine source. Yeah, absolutely. People need to be connected to what I call the higher self is the divine. I mean, when you're merged with your higher self and oversoul superconscious, and all is blissful. I mean, I know what bliss feels like. I know what higher consciousness and peace, inner peace feels like. And this whole disruptive flow that they're doing, which isn't even a flow, but it's an interference pattern, literally designed to take everybody down. I mean, I look at innocent people every single day, and I think to myself, these people are really harmless. They're nice people. They don't know what's going on. And I hate the idea of their innocent souls being trapped by this technology. It really bothers me.
Yes.
And they don't know.
They don't know. And thank you for bringing it up, because it's this, in the overall scheme of things, on this plane, it's the soul harvesting, soul recyclement that has to be stopped, and that has to be, like, dismantled, because eventually, we're all going to pass over for one reason or another. And, people always talk about, we've got to do all this for our kids. And I look at it slightly differently. I see all these elderly people in their what should be their golden twilight years. So many of them are pilled up with so many different pharmaceuticals, so on and so forth. And I look at them and I think they're going to pass over before too long. And if we don't get this right, if we don't fix it this time, if we don't draw a line in the sand and get it right this time, they're going to be recycled again before too long, right? They're going to come back in another archontic, patriarchal, mucked up world all over again, and the cycle will just continue indefinitely. And see, people have to get out of this concept of cycles too, where like the yugas, the golden era, the not so golden era, the not so cool era. It should all be the same kind of thought manifestation, highly spiritually evolved kind of plane where we're all self-regulating. We don't need laws. We don't need priesthoods. We don't need statutes to for us to comport ourselves in a proper nurturing way, right?
We don't need babysitters because we know better. Yeah, we can make our own decisions and conscious.
We can make we can and we will. Yeah. And so when I look at these elderly people, it's like that's what brings it home to me. It's not so much the kids. And what's interesting about the kids is there really are kids. I don't like the term indigo children, but I know that such kids exist, that they've come into this world with more than a double, stranded helix, that they've come in with 3 or more strands, and they're operating kind of, they've come from a different place, and they're here to be frequency busters. And that in itself is part of the reason, besides depopulation, why they hammer the kids with the vaccine schedule. Right. They do. Because they don't want these kids like growing up and even in their preteen years and adolescent years is having all these metaphysical abilities that's going to shake the foundations of this whole rotten system. Right. So they're just hammering them all. And so I see that, I don't like cycles, but I see the cycle of the elderly passing over and then being rebirthed as young, being hammered by vaccines. And if we're not careful, that outcome of that particular timeline outcome I talked about, of living in domed cities, of being little more than automatons and drones with no range of emotions, that's staring us in the face. And so it's time for people you're either going to be part of the problem or part of the solution. So just get on board. We need all the help we can get, basically. Yeah, well said, James. Well said. And when I think about the transition, I've talked about this before, but when people transition out of this lifetime, I think to myself, the false matrix, how it consumes, how the simulation, what they're running in this false matrix, how it's a simulation, and people don't know they're in a simulation. So when they transfer out, they're going into the AI simulation program once again in a loop. Yes. See, now beings like you and I know how to break and bust through those things. Yes. But most people wouldn't know how. Yes, and that was a very good point, because those well-meaning loved ones on the other side beckoning us to go, they're in the matrix too. They're still in the matrix, right? Now, at some level, some of them have cottoned on to the fact that it's a never-ending feedback loop, but most don't, right? And they have their moment, their time, if you will, in their state where they can learn and have whatever kind of bliss that they can experience in such realms. But eventually, and nobody asks why this is. Nobody asks why they have to be reincarnated. And not only that why do they have to come back to this world? Because we're galactic humans. Well, we're multidimensional quantum beings. Why can't we reincarnate on other worlds or other dimensions or other planes? And we have free will, and we can do that, James. Yes. So what I encourage people to do is just get in the habit of this mindset where you're not going to go to the light, that you're going to bypass that whole matrix control system and wind up getting regurgitated back here. I mean, if you're going to come back here in a future incarnation, come back on your own terms. Come back on a spaceship. Come back because you want to reincarnate here, not because you have to, right? And so that's what I love talking about you. Talking with you is you're a big picture type of person. You see beyond the cosmos. I mean, everyone's like, all this hand wringing and wailing and gnashing of, teeth about, the Mars base and the moon base and all this. And, it's like they still can't see the big picture. They're still thinking in terms of the cosmos. Right. Well, they don't realize their essence of origin. I think you and I understand that we are vast beings and we have that connection to source in the full light universe, which of course is our essence of origin. And to me, it's like going home. I mean, I understand the universe very, very well. It's second nature. To I don't question a lot of things a lot of people do on this planet, because to me, it's just something, and maybe it's a cellular memory design. But yes, and you make a very good point when you talk about defectives, because i.e. these people that are like perps and harm animals and harm other people and harm the environment. They're literally glitches in the matrix. They're a manifestation of this simulation, right? And you've noted this. I've noted it myself. It's true that there's a lot of special kids being born, and I'm encouraged by that. I'm tickled pink that there's a lot of these special kids. If their parents can just steer them around all these vaccinations and on all this toxic baby food and everything else, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, there's far more of these empty vessels being born. And of course, being empty, nature abhors a vacuum. Well, something's going to come in. Something's going to fill the void, fill the vacuum. And what will it be? It'll be this hive mind parasite kind of entity or entities that take them up as host, basically, right? And then they'll be thoroughly plugged in, and not only be plugged into the matrix, but become part of the matrix itself, an indistinguishable part of it, of the matrix. And more of those people are being born. And I'm seeing even, I'm 50 years old, and people like me and our age, thereabouts, we're seeing people increasingly older, like in their 40s and late 30s, that really are empty vessels, that they're just they've just been taken up as hosts, and the hive mind parasites have just completely taken them over. And some of these people, like you said, they're well-meaning. They're essentially good people. The kernel of goodness, that spark of divine creation, is still in there. However kind of dormant or atrophied it may be, it's still in there. But they've just succumbed. They've at a higher consciousness level, they've thrown in the sponge.
Right. I almost think that. Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I almost think that the soul has evacuated. I don't know if they ever had souls, to be honest with you, James. I think maybe there's only a certain percentage of beings that incarnate with real soul evolution. I don't know.
I believe that because genetic engineering and the mass production of hybrids and clones being what it is, not just in our solar system but throughout the cosmos. And we always hear stories about some of these grays that they have this, hive consciousness mindset. Ditto some of these insectoids, mantid beings. There's no individuation. They lack that divine spirit that identifies them as being a unique, sovereign being that is a part of a greater part of creation. And I see that. I really do believe you're right that there are, for lack of a better term, soulless beings, that they're operating on a computer program, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a big part of the problem. And that's why people have to develop their self-worth and develop their intuitiveness, where they have to stop seeking the approval of others, stop trying to fit in and be a part of the thundering herd. If something doesn't feel right, then don't go along with it. Just because all these automatons around you, like take the example of vaccines, for example, just because they're all plugged into the matrix and they're all empty vessels and soulless individuals, it doesn't mean that we have to go along with that. Stand in your own power, stand in your own authority, fulfill your own destiny. You have a destiny to fulfill. You just have to identify what it is, and let divine source guide you. Let divine source orchestrate some of your life. When you're plugged into your heart center and you're plugged into divine source, you can operate from a standpoint of comfort. We're not in a comfort zone, and also not in from a fear-based perspective, but a knowingness that I'll be where I need to be. I'll meet the people I need to be meeting, and I'll do the things I need to do because I have confidence in myself, because I have my inner harmony going. I have my inner equilibrium going. I'm plugged into divine source. And once you get to that space, it's like you don't care what the rest of the herd thinks. You don't care about fitting in. You don't care about who you upset or who you offend either.
Right, because you know who you are. I always call it like trust your cosmic knowing. I mean, you listen to the universe, you surrender to the streams of creation. I always have. I mean, even when I was being hit with that program, I literally let go of the wheel and gave it to Source, the full light universe, what are we going to call divine, the divine presence. But literally, I knew I could not control that, so I had to give it over to the full light universe, And I do believe that keeps us going, honestly. That's our source energy. That's where we come from, and that's what keeps us evolving.
It's the difference between blocked energy and allowing energy to flow. I mean, being a martial artist yourself, like in Tai Chi, for example, it's all about, allowing it to flow. Like Bruce Lee talks about this, become like water, allow it to flow. Whereas as people, and this is inherently a left-brained construct where they overthink, they overanalyze, they try to think their way through problems, and thinking is too slow.
Mm-hmm.
Expanded awareness, expanded consciousness, universal consciousness is where it's all at,
Yep.
where we just feel our way through things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's inherently a heart-centered, like divine source dynamic, where
Absolutely.
we just allow ourselves. Like that was a great example you just said, where despite all the challenges you had to endure when the interface started and the aftermath of that, where you just let go of the wheel, to use your term, and you allowed your divine inner source connection to guide you through and navigate you through all the pitfalls.
Mm-hmm.
That's a wonderful example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very effective too.
Yes, because if you had tried to think your way through something like that, okay, that's very much like trying to cram a square peg into a round hole, where we're trying to inject logic into an inherently insane, just psychopathic world, psychopathic matrix, right? We're embedding ourselves further into the matrix when we try to think our way through things. This is why the scientific dogma is the way it is. The religious dogma is the way it is, with all its endless chanting and endless learning by rote and repetitive recitations and so on and so forth. It's designed to instill those OCD thought loops and like lodge us further into the left brain. And that's just playing into the hands of this control system. We are divine beings that are spiritual, and we're multidimensional in nature, and we feel our way through things. We feel vibrations, we feel energies. Right?
Absolutely. I so agree with you. And it's all about the consciousness. Of course, I call it the consciousness effect, where, they talk about, the UFOs and the crafts and this and that, but literally we can navigate anywhere through consciousness. We can go from point A to point B without any distance in the illusion of time, because none of those exist through consciousness.
Absolutely.
We know how to navigate as multidimensional beings.
We know how to navigate it. We do, because anywhere where consciousness can go, i.e. astral travel, remote viewing, whatever the case may be, matter can go. And all matter is energy which resonates at a certain frequency. So yes, teleportation, bilocation, all that stuff exists. We don't need devices. We don't need stargates to jump through. We can do this on our own.
Are the stargates?
Right? Yeah, we are the stargates. We are organic stargates. And people have to start thinking along those terms and stop identifying with a bodysuit. There's another problem that these super soldiers have, where, I killed this alien, I killed that person, and then, I used this weapon system. And again, it's all an outward projection. It's an outward projection.
Yeah, and you know what my take is that it's probably a psychotronic experience and not even a real-time event.
Yes, I believe a lot of that is. I believe a lot of that is literally a theater of the mind. It's a virtual environment where sometimes they will train people in such a fashion. So when they do put them in either in a physical 3D, or let's say like a dimensionally enhanced version of themselves, they'll be able to operate automatically and just react to the stuff they were shown in this virtual environment over and over and over. Right. But I do believe that some of these that claim to have all these superpowers and have engaged in all these battles and stuff, that a lot of that is just a theater of the mind. They've never left their bed. They've just laid there all night, and they just inputted all this stuff into their minds and made them believe it. Because, as you know, they have a way of making, even in our astral bodies, our surroundings have solidity and density. Right. So it seems as if we're actually having a physical 3D experience when we're not. Right.
It's a virtual feed without a doubt. What comes to mind is the Kobayashi Maru. Remember that out of Star Trek?
Yes. Remind me of that story.
Well, just the simulation. It's just a simulation program, but still, I just thought it was interesting. But it's the same concept of
it's the same concept. Where is that the one where a young Kirk decided to not do what was expected of him? He kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, cheated, and then he kind of defeated the program. Yeah. Well, that's what's good.
Well, it's all a game board. I mean, you have to treat it like that. But unfortunately, people's lives are being destroyed in the process. And I think we have to redefine what is a game, what is real time reality, and how do we recalibrate the technology, or at least try to use it to the point where at least Tesla would be proud.
Yes, and that was one of the issues that I raised at that aforementioned UFO conference, where there was a big shot exopolitics guy, Steve Bassett, there, and he was taking umbrage at the fact that I was saying, well, as far as disclosure goes, it's, how does that play out in actual practice? Are the victims' families going to be compensated? Are the people that are subjected to harassment and intimidation and all the military pilots who've died, will their families be, compensated, so on and so forth? And how about all this technology that's been hoarded by the powers that be? Are we ever going to get so-called free energy? And I said, yeah. I was only being, half, serious. I said, yeah, when they figure out a way to meter it, yeah, maybe then we'll get it, but only after they deduct it from our credit debit accounts or whatever the case may be.
And it's supposed to be free.
It's supposed to be free because it's all about artificial scarcity. It's all about want. It's all about lack of abundance. And when we identify with the bodysuits and then we buy into the matrix programming, yes, all that becomes very real. All that becomes very frightening. And it becomes a constant preoccupation, a constant worry.
Survival issues.
We're in survival mode instead of being in creative abundance mode, and that's what people have to get back to. Is just safely move and shift that block traumatic energy, and just be comfortable in your own skin. Don't put on any airs. Just give yourself permission to be yourself. And forgive yourself for whatever mistakes you've made in the past. So many of our mistakes were mistakes we made based on an externally imposed ignorance because we're a part of this matrix construct. So we have poor association. We've made poor decisions. We've been untrue to ourselves in many ways. You know what? That's the nature of this matrix construct. We just have to be forgiving of ourselves and move on, and not allow our past to be like this albatross hanging around our necks and just like keeping us in a lower densified state.
Well said, James. And you know what? We're just about out of time here. But I want to thank you so much for being with us tonight. It's been so wonderful to have you on, and it always is. So thank you for sharing your wisdom. Yeah, you're just stellar. Oh, I do too. I always enjoy having you on. And I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in tonight as well. And please stay tuned for Researcher on a Mission with Dr. J coming on next on the Dark Matter Radio Network, of course. And now I think we have maybe 2 minutes plus or minus here. Do you have any final words? I know, to me, what comes to mind is that I'd love to see you do a workshop for healing for Milabs or anybody who's a contactee. Have you thought about that?
Well, yeah. I talk about universal truths, basically, of healing, reintegration, and there's a lot of different ways to achieve the same goal and the same results. One way really isn't any better than another way. I mean, it's the results that count. A lot of it really has to do with a mindset where we just make the decision to really start to work on ourselves and take our eyes off ourselves and our outward kind of bodysuits and go within. And so, yeah, one of these days, now, as a matter of fact, now that you mention it, 2 weeks from now on Sunday, that I think the last Sunday of the month, I'm going to be part of a Rise Multiversity teleconference panel.
Cool.
And it'll be about the alien love bite, alien manipulated love relationships, but also a lot of the inner dynamics of alien manipulation, mind control, emotional, energetic harvesting, so on and so forth. It'll be a very advanced course because some of the other researchers are really, really top shelf investigators who've done a lot of work on their own selves, but also have done a lot of healing and helping of others. So if anyone's interested in that, I could forward you the link, and then you could pass it on too.
Okay, what's your website once again, and how would people get in contact with you?
It's the Universal Seduction /Bartley. The Universal Seduction /Bartley, and you can find my email on that website.
Excellent. That's so good. Yeah, I'm so happy to have you on. Thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you.
Are you familiar with the holographic repatterning, by the way?
No, I'd like to know about it.
You know what comes to mind? I think that's going to be necessary, one of those necessary tools. With that, we're out of time. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, James.